Judges Corner is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com and GatheringMagic.com. Support our show by visiting both websites. Now it's time for Judges Corner with David Green.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching Judges Corner. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about how you can lose the game, both gracefully and with dignity. One of the first ways that you can lose the game is simply by conceding the game to your opponent. When you do this, you simply lose the game and either move on to something else if you feel like it, or continue on to game 2 or 3 of a match if you're in the middle of playing best 2 out of 3. When you concede, you can concede at any time for whatever reason. There is nothing holding you back and no restrictions as to when or how you can concede. One of the next most common ways to lose the game is by having 0 or less life. This happens just before any player would receive priority when state-based actions check. And when they check and see that you're at 0 or less life, you automatically lose the game at that point. Let's go ahead and explain that a little bit more and go into a couple of examples to help you better understand what I mean by that. In our first example, when I attack with a Lotless Troll, and you block with a Burning Tree Emissary while at 1 life, you'll lose when I pitch a creature to give it a +1/+1 counter, to trample over for 1 damage, leaving you at 0 life. However, you can stop this by destroying my creature or even gaining an extra life before moving on to the damage step. But, if you have no responses and take the damage, when state-based actions check, they'll see you at 0 life, and you'll lose before anyone would receive priority. Let's say I War Leader's Helix my opponent to deal 4 damage to them, while they're at 10 life, and I'm at 4. He responds by redirecting the 4 damage to me, which would put me to 0 life. But, when I take 4 from my War Leader's Helix, I don't die right away, because the spell needs to finish resolving. Since the second part of War Leader's Helix says you gain 4 life, I'll end up gaining the life before the spell finishes resolving, and I won't die. This is because the rest of the spell has to resolve before state-based actions are checked. Another way you can lose is when you go to draw more cards than what's left in your library. For example, if a game has gone on long enough and your opponent has assaulted your library with things like Archive Trap and Glimpse the Unthinkable, you might be low on cards. When you run out, you have until your next draw, which could be either during your next draw phase or through a spell or another effect, to lose. Keep in mind, though, that effects that don't say draw on them, like Dark Confidant's Trigger, isn't considered drawing, and won't cause you to lose the game if you don't have any cards left in your library when you would go to add cards through those effects. Poison, like in real life, can kill you too if just the right amount is ingested. Intuited Giant, 15 poison counters total for your team will result in both of you losing the game when state-based actions are checked. In every other format, the total number of poison needed is only 10. The Commander format has an additional way to lose. In a game of Commander, if you're dealt 21 combat damage or more by someone's opposing commander, even your own if it's stolen from you, you lose the game. Keep in mind, though, that a commander is the card designated as a commander at the start of the game. If I clone Timmy's commander, Omnath, my Kalamnath won't deal commander damage, since it's not a commander. And just because a commander loses its name or becomes something new, it doesn't mean it stops being a commander. Like how a Morphed Chroma can still deal commander damage if it's a Dex commander, or how a Sliver Queen commander can be Cyto-shaped into a bear cub, but still be a commanding bear cub. When you lose in a multiplayer game, all cards you owned are returned to you. But if you happen to control cards that your opponents own, then they will either A, switch from your control back to their previous controller on the battlefield, like when you die and had a mind control on one of your opponent's creatures that also had a control magic on it from another player. It returns back to the card's previous controller, which was the one with the control magic on it, and not the card's owner in this case. Or B, if you had control of a creature that was never controlled by anybody else, such as through bribery or playing a permanent stolen through Nightveil Spectre. That card goes directly to its owner's exile zone in that case. Also, all spells and effects made by you that are on the stack cease to exist. After you leave the game, priority will then pass to the next player in turn order, if you had priority at the time of loss. In multiplayer games, if an effect states that one player wins the game, instead, what it really does is causes all of their opponents to lose the game. For example, one player controls a Platinum Angel, and the other controls a Test of Endurance while at 50 life, while the third player is really sitting there with nothing. When the player with Test of Endurance triggers during their upkeep, the third player will end up losing the game, while the player with Platinum Angel will continue to play on, ignoring Test of Endurance's trigger for the time being. Finally, drawing the game doesn't result in a loss or a win for either player involved, and if both players would somehow lose the game at the same time, the game ends in a draw. Take, for example, if I play Hurricane for x equals 10 and both my opponent and I are at less than 10 life, in the end, we'll both be at or below 0 life, and when state-based actions check, we'll both be dead, resulting in a draw. Another way that you can lose the game is if you're issued a game loss by a judge at a sanctioned event. You can receive a game loss for certain types of infractions, and you can read more about those infractions and their associated penalties by reading up on the Infraction Procedure Guide or by reading the Judging at Regular document for regular events. Or stay tuned where we're going to cover more about that in future episodes. So with that concludes our episode. If you have any questions, make sure to send us an email at judgescorner@gatheringmagic.com. And until next time, remember, you just lost the game.